everyone, it's Paul from Alexander Knife Sharpening, Laser Engraving. What I want to talk about today is differences between kind of the two styles of sharpening. So we have edge leading and we have edge trailing. And there are differences between the two. Now, when I say differences, my purpose here in this video is not to talk about results, because our results should be the same. We want a well-sharpened knife is the end result of either style of sharpening. What I'm talking about is the differences between what is it that you need to know about edge leading and what is it that you need to know about edge trailing, as far as techniques, different things that you're going to encounter, different things that you're going to see, so that when you run into an issue or you run into not getting the results that you're looking for, you can kind of start to diagnose what's going on there. Now, why do I bring this up? Just the other day, a guy I've been helping for a while had what I think every sharpener goes through it sometime, is you come in one day and you're doing what you think you normally do and you're not getting good results. And this can be for a multitude of reasons. It did happen to me a lot more in the beginning when I was first sharpening than it rarely happens now. But like just the other week, I told you guys about when I changed the height of my tables, how that affected things. First thing I'm going to talk about, I'm going to focus on just edge leading sharpening, and then video number 2 I will do edge trailing sharpening, and I'll kind of make you aware of the points of both things that I think are the common pitfalls that people get into. There goes my fire department. Of course, never fails. Whenever you're filming something, fire department goes by or my landscapers show up. But that's the purpose of this video. Just help you diagnose if you run into that day where you come in and you're like, why am I getting horrible results today? These are the things to immediately look at and think about and check yourself to make sure that you're doing things correctly. So the very first thing I noticed in the video that he sent me was that probably one of the most crucial things, and I've talked about this before, I have a video out there about the biggest mistake that new sharpeners make, or people trying to sharpen their own knives make, and that is not raising a burr on one side. And just like my video stated, that was the first thing I noticed that he was doing. He was getting up, he took 2 strokes, and he immediately flipped the knife over to the other side and did 2 strokes. And he never checked for a burr. And I said, you didn't check the knife for a burr. And he's like, oh, I touched it. And he goes, it felt rough. This is the number one mistake that people make. Now, let's talk about the proper way to check for that burr. If you ever watch me check for a burr, I start at one end of the knife and I roll my fingers up and over the edge. I'm not going down the blade like this. I'm not feeling, anything. I'm going up like this, all the way down the blade, okay? Because a burr is a hook from the abrasive grinding starts to take this metal on the other side and makes this little hook. And you will feel that hook. And on a 120 grit belt, it's almost impossible not to feel it. But what will often happen, you can't just check one little spot, because you might have a burr down here and not have one up here. So you have to keep grinding until you have a burr across the entire knife. If you flip to the other side too soon, you're not going to get good results. Okay, so check for that burr and check the whole way. Now, I'm at a point where a lot of times, yes, visually I can tell if it's there, but some people, you may not have great vision or be able to do that, but you really can't miss that 120 grit burr once you start to feel it. Now, that said, what's another common mistake? Well, one thing that I just don't even do it anymore, because I've almost always regret it when I do, which is not starting at 120 grit. I've just found Sometimes I'll be like, oh, this knife seems pretty good, or I even do a cut test with it, and I'll think like, oh, I'll start at 600 grit and go from there. And almost every time I do, I've end up regretting it because there's either a chip or a microchip or something I feel later on and have to go back and redo the knife. I have also found that it's always worth starting at 120. You might only need one stroke and have a burr all the way across that knife. But in general, I have found that's just the best policy. Get up there, do at least one stroke. If you have a burr the whole way across, great. Typically, I find it usually at the most, the minimum, it's usually one or two, it's usually two strokes. But it can be a lot more. And these knives that I'm working on right here are a perfect example of it. These knives have probably never been sharpened in 30 years. They are incredibly dull. This knife couldn't cut anything. It's so rolled, it's so not even close to being sharp that some of these have taken 7, 8, 9 passes on this 120 grit to raise a burr. So keep that in mind too, that initial burr raising could be anywhere from 1 or 2 strokes to a whole lot of strokes depending on the condition of the knives, the angle that everything is set at. Now, some people will tell you, and this isn't a bad thing too, if it gets beyond about 5 strokes, generally, usually one of two things are going on. Either the angle is completely very different than the original angle, and you're really reprofiling that knife to your new angle that it's set. So if you're getting into like a whole lot of strokes, you either have very, very, very dull knives, or you're not really close to matching what was originally there. You're probably reprofiling this knife to whatever angle that is. And that's totally fine, but just know that it's not uncommon that you may have to take a whole bunch of strokes at it. Another thing that could be going on is your Kubatron belt might be starting to reach the end of its life. This one that I have up here is also quite dull. I probably should have already replaced it. I didn't replace it when I did my change at the beginning of the month because I felt it still had a decent amount of use in it, but now it's pretty much done. If I was to swap this out, these probably wouldn't be taking quite as many strokes as they're taking now. So always keep that in mind too. It could be your abrasive is starting to wear. What could be another thing? Maybe your angle's off. Maybe your angle guide slipped. Maybe your angle changed for some reason. Maybe you had your angle set to something different and forgot to change it back to what you want it to be now. So always check that too. Here's another thing I want to talk about when we talk about raising the burr, because it's been the only thing that people have really ever been critical about in that video of the number one mistake people make trying to sharpen their own knives. Usually expect it to be between the 2 and 5 strokes, but if it starts getting beyond that, you're reprofiling the knife or your angle is too low. So you can up the angle. Now, to me, that's typically I utilize that a little bit more when I'm doing sharpening on my Tormek. So if I'm doing my Tormek and I'm not raising a burr relatively quickly and it seems to be taking way too long, I know I need to raise that angle up on my Tormek. But remember, that's a machine that's sharpening a lot slower pace and isn't going to be as quick as a 1x30. But I will say this. So the one thing I do want to add, a lot of people were critical. They said, oh, well, you talked about raising a burr on the one side and then going to the other side and raising a burr on the other side and then starting to count your strokes from that point on. And I went back and clarified it in the comments. But yes, if it takes you 10 strokes to raise a burr on the one side, you pretty much should do 10 strokes on the other side, or expect that 10 strokes on the other side to raise a burr again on that side, because you do want to keep the knife even. Now, is it a huge deal if you raise the burr in 2 strokes and you only did 1 on the other side? No, but if it's taken a lot of grinding, which is basically reprofiling to get that burr, you do want to be somewhat conscious of how many strokes you did so that you do an equal amount or very close to an equal amount on the other side to keep that knife even. Now, once you've raised a burr on both sides, and as you go up in your progressions, feeling that burr and continuing to raise a burr on each side is not as important. I don't really care that much about raising a burr or feeling the burr at the 600 grit or 1200 grit, which is the process that I use once I've done it on 120 on both sides. I'm good to go after that. At that point, I'm really just counting equal strokes on both sides. So that's kind of it for what comes to mind. Well, actually, I don't want to say that's it. Let's talk about another thing here that's super important. So a lot of guys like edge trailing because you don't have to feel a burr. You will see the burr. You're not going to see the burr as easily going edge leading. You're just not, okay? You'll feel it, but a lot of times you won't see it. Now, some people can see it. I at times can see it, but sometimes you can't. But you should always be able to feel that burr. And that's why you have to be checking for it. Edge trailing sharpening, you can't miss the burr because you're looking for that big, long, foily burr that you're creating. A lot of people ask, well, why do you do edge leading, Paul, instead of edge trailing? And it's not that I don't do edge trailing, I do. And, you know, if you watch all my videos, you'll see there are times I like to edge trail. I edge trail on filleting knives. I edge trail on boning knives with the big curve in it. Anything that's got a weird curve where I could cut the belt, I'm going edge trailing. So it's not that I don't use it. There are times that I do. It's just that I prefer edge leading because it is quicker. Now, with edge leading sharpening, I have found the burr is removed faster. So that's a quicker process too. And Cliff Carey has always said that your belts actually last longer edge leading. I've never checked one way or the other. But those are just some of the things to consider. But I can guarantee you it is much faster. It's significantly faster than edge trailing. Do I have anything against edge trailing? I don't. Like I said, if you want to edge trail because you don't like edge leading, you know, some people don't like doing thin knives edge leading. They're going to slip in and, you know, gouge the knife or hurt the knife. Those are all legit issues if that's what you're concerned of. And, especially a lot of guys that start on a Ken Onion Elite are very reluctant to go edge leading. They get very used to that edge trailing sharpening, and that's what they want to do all the time. I got no issues with that. Like I said, I am not partial to one way or the other. If you don't mind taking the more time, then go right ahead and edge lead. And like I said, I edge lead too. And the next video that I will be doing will be talking about edge leading and the things that I know that you have to look for edge leading and things that you have to do differently edge leading than you do when you're edge sharpening. So that's pretty much it. I hope this helps some of you out. You know, don't be concerned if you run into a day where all of a sudden everything just doesn't seem to be working right. It happens. It happens to the best of us. It happens to people who've been sharpening for many, many years that are fantastic sharpeners. Just go back and check yourself. Check and make sure that you have checked, that you checked for a burr. Check and make sure that your belts aren't too worn. Check and make sure that your angles are correct. If you're using multiple machines, always make sure that your highest angle. So I've talked about this before. You know, the one way to avoid it is work on one machine and always change the belts out on that machine. But if you're using 2, 3, multiple machines, your very last machine that you sharpen on, I'm not talking stropping, but the last machine that you sharpen on should be the highest angle. So if this was 17 and this was 17.1 and this was 17.2, 17.2 should be my last. You don't want to go 17, 17, 16.8. If you do that, you're not going to get good results. So that highest angle needs to be the last one. Ideally, if you can get them all exactly the same, that's the best. But, you know, it doesn't always work out that way. But try and make sure that that last sharpener is always your highest angle. And that doesn't mean your strop, because a lot of people will strop 1 degree higher than the angle that they sharpened with. It shouldn't affect it when we're talking stropping. Don't worry about your stropping. Just make sure that you're within a degree of your sharpening angle and you'll be good to go on stropping. So I hope that helps everybody, and I hope that maybe clears up a few fine points on edge leading sharpening and look for edge trailing and the things to look for in that. Okay, just a couple more things that I want to show you real quick to help making setting things, your angles, quick and easy. So one you can get is an angle cube. You zero it on the platen always and then move it to your angle guide, make your angle adjustments, and that will help you set your angles properly and try and get them as close to the same as possible. And remember, last machine, highest grit belt, always the highest angle. Okay, what's another option? These are a great option right here. These are little angle wedges. And I have a link to these on my list of tools that I recommend. And they are awesome. Okay, and all you have to do with these is loosen up your angle guide, slide the wedge in there, kind of hold it in place, bring everything down upon it and tighten it, and then just pop it out. And you can go very quickly. You can see I have my 3 favorite angles here. I have a 15, a 20, and a 17. The set comes with a whole bunch of angles, but for me, this is what I use, these 3, 15, 20, and 17. 20's where I do most EDCs. 15 is my Japanese knives, and 17 are my Western kitchen knives. And I will keep these up top here. The main thing I would tell you with these is just be careful not to suck them up with your vacuum if you're cleaning up. I have done that. It's very annoying. Then you got to tear the bag open and go look for it. These are also great to use on flat stones. This is designed to have a rubber band, hold it against your flat stone, but then you can use that as an angle guide if you're sharpening by hand. Very useful for a lot of things in your shop. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you guys like this video. Remember, the links are always in the description. And please subscribe, like the channel, like the videos, help share it, and help us get to 10,000. We're getting really close to 10,000 subscribers. Have a great weekend, everyone.